We open this concert with a favorite overture of Rossini, one of the most prolific opera composers of all time, produced a fantastic amount of music for the stage up till about his late 30s and suddenly retired. And like an awful lot of very successful men who retired, he found he almost immediately plunged into a deep depression. And before too long, he was composing again, but rather differently from what he'd written earlier, because his opera music is just so full of life. Wagner, I think it was, called Rossini the genius of sheer animal spirits. And that is just about the right description. It's so alive, it bursts onto the stage. I don't know if you've ever seen the Bugs Bunny cartoon, The Rabbit of Seville, in which Bugs Bunny goes through a whole series of adventures based on the music of the overture to The Barber of Seville by Rossini, but it fits the music so superbly. You can imagine Rossini absolutely delighting in the adventures of Bugs Bunny, all that subversiveness, all that riotousness, all that slapstick. It's there in the music, as well as all those fantastic tunes that almost kind of challenge you to make up words to them on the spot. That's what Rossini does. Now, after this is a piece you may not have heard of, and don't give yourself a hard time if you haven't, because Paul Dukas, early 20th century French composer, actually wrote very, very little. He was a great perfectionist. There was an awful lot of music that he destroyed and never left onto the stage. But he did allow us to hear his ballet La Péri, and we have two movements from that, Fanfare and the poème dansé, kind of little digest of the ballet in this concert tonight. It's an extraordinary piece. A Peri, I should tell you, is a beautiful magical spirit in Persian and Middle Eastern mythology. And in this ballet, she encounters Alexander the Great, who has spread his empire throughout the known world. And again, he finds that when he's conquered the known world, he suddenly becomes very depressed because there's nothing left to do. So he sets himself a challenge. How can he achieve immortality? The Peri appears to want to help him, but really the answer is that he learns in time is to forget it, that striving for more immortality is vain, and he should be content with what he has and indeed what he is. That's the message of the music, but we don't even need to know that just to enjoy this extremely beautiful music, which in some ways is full of the kind of the afterglow of very late 19th century Romanticism, and in others is kind of crisscrossed with elements from the French so-called Impressionists, from Debussy and Ravel. So a lot of color, a lot of atmosphere, a lot of delicate suggestion, and also some rather wonderful, powerful, splendid moments, like the brass fanfare at the beginning, which has a tremendous sort of radiant, brazen quality to it. But the work I imagine most of you are looking forward to most in this concert tonight is Sergei Rachmaninov's wonderful Second Symphony. Now, I've been to Russia a few times and talked to Russians, and it's often struck me when I go there. Well, one thing you can't help noticing is that Russian composers like Tchaikovsky, like Borodin, like Rachmaninoff, even like Prokofiev and Shostakovich, they love melodies. They love very, very long melodies. Melodies that take a huge deep breath and then seem to sort of pour out in phrases that last whole minutes. It kind of fits with the nature of that extraordinary country, because particularly if you come from a little island like Britain, going to Russia, you are immediately aware of just how much space there is. Even in a city like Petersburg, Palace Square is so huge, it creates a kind of sense of vertigo. And I once took the train from Petersburg to Moscow. It took 8 hours. I staggered off at the end and said to my friend, well, you do get an idea of how big this country is. He said, no, you don't. We've only come a very little way. It's 2.5 days to Siberia. And in every Russian composer, it seems to me, even when they're city composers, there's a real sense of that enormousness, of that great, huge space. And this symphony, well, it lasts nearly an hour, even if you don't observe the big repeat in the first movement, which most people don't. And as I said, it's full of tune after tune, but each of these tunes, you can almost feel Rachmaninoff stopping and going, right, deep breath, let's have another wonderful melody. Nowhere more so, I think, than the great clarinet solo that begins the slow third movement, which is just one of those gifts from God, it seems to me. It's so beautiful. Rachmaninoff, he's a fascinating figure. I love him. Years and years ago, I was talking to a Russian friend of mine, and I said, why is it that so much music in Russia is in the minor key, not the major? Here's a minor chord, and here's a major chord. You see, that sounds quite bright, doesn't it? But when you change it to that, it's a little bit darker, isn't it? And when you put nice deep sounds, of which Rachmaninoff is so fond, immediately a sense of darkness, of somberness, but it's not heavy. It's not depressing. This is the thing. Rachmaninoff absolutely loves minor keys, absolutely loves minor keys, but it's a real love. I remember when I asked my friend about this, I said, why is so much Russian music, not just symphonies, concertos, operas, but pop songs, military marches, folk music, why is it also minor key? I remember what he said, this is because we reserve the major key for inexpressible sorrow. And it just is, the Russians have an ability, it seems to me, to enjoy sadness, enjoy melancholy, to almost rest back and accept the fact fatalistically that life is just like that. It's going to be full of sadness. To pursue happiness is ludicrous. It will come to you, but it's a bit more like a kind of a cat happiness. You know, the more you try and get it to sit on your lap, the more it doesn't. And it'll come when you least expect it. And Rachmaninoff, well, there are radiant, happy moments in his music. There certainly are towards the end of this symphony, but we go through some wonderful, dark, somber, melancholy, moody stuff first. And it's like a kind of warm bath, the gorgeous scoring, the wonderful tunes. I think Rachmaninoff can really teach us to not expect life to be a bed of roses all the time, but that you can even enjoy it, even when it's not. And doesn't have to be a message, though, in the end. This is just a glorious piece of music, an incredible soundscape that may well set you thinking in terms of vast Russian landscapes with huge forests and lakes. Rachmaninoff certainly did associate you with that in his own mind. Most of his later life, he was to spend in exile, and like many Russian exiles, he found it particularly painful. The memory of Mother Russia, it was so strong. Yet there's almost a kind of nostalgia even here when he was still resident in Russia before the Russian Revolution. It's that kind of thing that makes it so moving and so at the same time, well, but so thoroughly enjoyable. I must say I love this piece, and love it most of all sometimes when it's its darkest. It's gorgeous darkness.